So those Mini Rocker BMXs look like a ton of fun, but I can't justify almost $100 for a used one and over $300 for a new one. So in this video, this will be part one of maybe 2 or 3. We're going to make one ourselves for about 1/10 of the cost of new. So we all know that these little Mini Rocker BMX and other similar bikes are pretty darn expensive. So I'm going to build my own, starting out with this little piece of an English bottom bracket. And then I've got this bushing here. I think it's a control arm bushing for like a 68, 69 Chrysler of some sort. I've also got a freewheel here. And what we're going to start with are these tires from Harbor Freight. They're actually the same size and everything as the Mini Rocker BMXs. We're going to stack that bushing on, and then that bottom bracket part, which of course has the same threads to fit the freewheel. So I'm going to go ahead and just weld this all together. Luckily, the wheel splits and the bearing is on the inside, so I'm going to go ahead and weld that bushing piece to the bolts and the rim itself. Once I have it pretty well centered and tacked into place, I'm going to go ahead and spin it and make sure that it's not wibbly-wobbly too badly. And if we're within maybe a 1/16, I think that's going to be plenty fine. The chain might show a little bit of deviation going from tight to a little bit loose, but a 1/16 I think will be just fine. And I do want to interject in the middle of this. If you've made it this far, I'm hopefully entertaining you or educating, something like that. Anyways, if you guys could like and subscribe, that'd be great. Really helps out the channel a ton. Anyways, back to the welding. All right, now with that little centerpiece welded on, I can kind of figure out where the freewheel is going to go. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of just balance that bottom bracket piece until it looks like it's pretty square. And just like before, I'm going to give it a tack or two and then just bend it and make sure it's lined up. And it looks pretty darn good here. So I'm going to go ahead and finalize the welding. Now, this is definitely not the prettiest way, and it's going to be a little bit hard to reach that Schrader valve. But for the sake of the bike and trying to build a Mini Rocker BMX for about 1/10 of the cost, this I think will work out pretty good. Now what I'm doing here is I'm using the backside of a quarter drive extension to bust out the easier to remove bearing. And what I'm going to do is I've got to make a little shim that fits inside there, kind of like a razor scooter. I just need a little shim that fits over the bolt, but presses up against the inner bearing race. That way when we tighten this back wheel and the bearings come together, they're not squeezing together and kind of destroying these bearings. So what I've got here is some 3/4 OD 065 wall tubing. And I've already measured the distance between the bearings, and on this wheel here, it was 1.25 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and just mark it there. And I'm going to go ahead and use a tubing cutter. That way I know the cut is really, really nice straight up and down. That way both sides of the tube are nice and flat and can meet up with the bearing race. So now with the inner bushing all done, that can go ahead and go inside the wheel. And we could go ahead and put our bearing back in. Needs a little bit of persuasion with a hammer. All right, and there we go. Now we just got one more bushing to make, and that's going to be the one that goes from the inside, like where the freewheel is, goes through and then goes up against the dropout of the bike. So I do have to open up this hole a little bit. It's a little bit small. So I'm going to go ahead and take my reamer and open this area up here. Always a good safe place to do some reaming. All right, I'm going to go ahead and blow away all the metal shavings before I get some splinters. Always blow it off your arms, and if your safety glasses are nearby, go ahead and blow off your face before you even take them off. All right, and I'm just going to go ahead and mark this about 1/4 inch past the freewheel. And there we go. Now we've got essentially a whole back tire and axle assembly that's ready for our little Mini Rocker BMX. I'm going to go ahead and grab this little kid's bike frame. Now, this was a 12-inch kid's bike to start with. And ironically, the top tube on this bike is about 3/4 inch longer than the Mini Rocker BMX. Anyways, for the dropouts, we're going to have to open these up with our reamer. And keep in mind that the bolt is going to be bigger on one side than the other. So when you ream out the dropouts, whichever way you have the bolt facing is kind of the way it has to be for the rest of the bike's life. So we're going to go ahead and just ream that out. And on one side, it opened up to 7/16, and on the other side was just a hair over 1/2 inch. As always, giving everything a blowing off after I use the reamer. You really don't want that stuff in your eyes. That's definitely a bad thing. So we're going to go ahead and grab our wheel and give it a test fit. And it fits nicely in place. Really, really good. You do have to manage those little bushings a little bit, so it's kind of finicky, but it will work. And luckily, being that I'm using a similar size sprocket as what the coaster brake had when the bike still had its 12-inch wheels, I can go ahead and use the factory chain. This is going to give me terrible gear inches, so I will be upgrading the main sprocket up to hopefully a 40 tooth in the future if it'll fit. But for now, we're just building this thing as cheap as possible, so I'm going to go ahead and use a 15/16 on one side and 11/16 on the other, and give it a test. Now, it does work really well. The only problem I'm running into is a little bit of the knobs of the tire are just barely touching the chainstay. So when I take the bicycle apart to get it ready for paint, I'm going to go ahead and massage the chainstays a little bit with a hammer. And then the next part that we're going to need are some forks. Now, the kids' bike forks are always really, really bad. So this is a 20-inch mountain bike fork, but these tubes are actually pretty darn strong. We're going to go ahead and get rid of all the pink stuff and save this, which is plenty wide to fit the tire. We're going to need a pretty long extension, and I believe that was a 5mm Allen head. We're going to go ahead and pull off these little plastic caps. And then with that, we could feed our extension in, crack those little bolts loose, and they're pretty long. They're probably like 20 turns each. They got to come out. Now, this spring here, this fork, does not have liquid or anything in it. It's just a couple of springs and some little rubber booties. So it comes apart real easy. And from here, you can see that we have a nice black fork to work with. And if you guys wanted to see what was inside these cheap little suspension forks, that's it. They just look like valve springs to a small block. I'm going to go ahead and put these black caps on before I lose them, melt them, whatever. And that's going to be our fork for the front of the Mini Rocker BMX. And it's looking pretty good. But that'll be on the next episode, and that's when we'll finish it up. And part of the reason why I'm building this Mini Rocker, one, I've always wanted to ride one, but I've also got a lot of leftover parts from a previous project. As you can see, that little blue wheel and the tire in the background there, that came off the frame that we're using for our Mini Rocker. And this is a previous video that I put out a few weeks ago in regards to just making a bicycle that I was trying to be like semi-retro futuristic, and I built it out of stainless steel exhaust tubing for a car and using some kids' bike parts. I wound up actually having a pretty darn cool looking project, and I'm really hoping that this is the way the Mini Rocker comes out. It's kind of one of those trust the process type videos. And this is how exhaust tubing and a kid's bike turned out. And I was trying to go for like the Bicentennial Man, artificial intelligence type movies, you know, early 2000s, futuristic, or at least how we thought the future would go. But yeah, so this is why you should, if you're in a hobby, you should definitely keep everything that you've got and try to organize it, hopefully better organized than what I keep my stuff as. But you'll never know when you're going to need something, or if you can repurpose things multiple times. What is all over my face? Well, anyways, guys, I'll see you in the next one.